We are Odd School Studios. The thoughts, the process, the work. This is our inner world.
Yeah, I'll kind of start this off because I'm excited about these guys. These ants are called the Heed, and Greg and I kind of talk about them always as being metaphorically like the zombies of this world. They're an ant that have existed so long without a colony that now they're kind of just like bloodthirsty. They're not functioning within a whole anymore. All they kind of want to do is find destruction. And that's like kind of their main purpose in life right now is to destroy all the other existing colonies. And when we were like discussing them and talking about them, one thing to me was visually they had to look a lot different and be kind of a lot more beastly than the other ants. Like they had to have longer arms, they had to be more skinny because they weren't really eating. They kind of were just like living to be for destruction. And that's kind of like where we started with the heat. And obviously we're looking kind of like at the drawing of like where we landed, and Greg kind of speak more to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, you hit on it for sure about like looking a little more beast. I think the word or sort of the phrase we kept saying was like these like obviously we're drawing ants for all these other characters, but a lot of the other characters I really made a point of striking this sort of trying to strike this balance at least of them having quite a bit of humanity to them because obviously I think as a reader, you really identify with the character when you feel they're human, right? Rather than them being these like super buggy, super, kind of alien kind of things. You don't identify with them as easily. I think with the Heat, it was sort of a like, throw all that out. Let's lean fully into these are the ants of the desert. Like they are anti as can be. And I think um yeah, I think, it was sort of especially trying to strike that balance for this being more of a mid-grade book of, like, you wanted them to feel scary without them feeling, like, too off-putting. Because I think especially with them being a little bit, like, trying to be for a younger audience, at least, uh, for the most part, you didn't want something that some kid's gonna pick up and it's gonna give them nightmares, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's cool too when we're describing this world. Obviously, we set these ants in a realistic setting, but kind of like stretch that to be in the world of fiction. But the world where these ants are all living, it's called the desert fields. And they all have to kind of live within the colonies because the outside elements are too strong to survive. Like they're just too intense. Like most ants or most bugs, like if they're not in shelter, they will die from the heat. But the heat are kind of our fictional bug that have adapted to live in the heat. So their exoskeletons are just stronger. And like when we were drawing these and thinking about these characters is really important to us to like we need to like create a bug that looks like it can survive in the most intense environment ever. And when you see it, like you're like, oh, the only like reaction you have to these bugs, like we need to run, because these things have survived too much, too harsh environments. Like they're kind of not even bugs anymore in a way. They're kind of just like this force of destruction almost. They're kind of like one with a desert field and being in the sense of like the desert field kind of destroying you with the environment. And now the heat have kind of like taken that persona as like all we want to do now is destroy. Like that's our only goal. We are like kind of like walking death.
Yeah, I think and you mentioned sort of like, they're out for blood and they're out, I know you said zombie as a reference point, but, and zombie is in a lot of ways a great reference point, but I think the thing I actually kept thinking about as I was working on these was, I don't know if you read Blood Hunt last year, that,
Yeah.
yeah, that, the artist Pepe Larraz, or Larraz, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, um, drew, and I mean, the panels he would draw for Blood Hunt, for those who don't know the story, it's, basically like the world's been taken over by vampires. They're like, almost like the zombie version of vampires. They're spreading like crazy. They're like super mindless, and very monstrous. And I mean, he nailed those panels. Like he nailed
Yeah.
the design of those, and just like the way you just would feel these hordes in a lot of ways of just like vampires. And just with the fangs bared and everything like that. And that was, I mean, I honestly, I had, there were multiple times when I was sort of working on the heat and especially thinking about sort of how you draw a horde, where I just have Aces of the Blood Hunt sitting out next to me, looking at those and just trying to figure out, okay, how do you strike that balance?
Yeah. I think the coolest thing to me about how the heat function in this book and something that's like going to be kind of like portrayed is they're not the main villain. In a lot of ways, they kind of are just like another environmental element that the ants have to like learn how to navigate around because they're not like they're not even hunting you when you escape the colony as a whole. Like they're in a lot of ways just like another force of weather. And that's kind of like how we thought about them and talk about them and reference them. Like, yeah, they are breaking into a colony, but like a big storm hits a colony or hits something big, it wants to move it out of its way. And when it's moved that structure, like they're not necessarily a huge threat anymore. Like
Hmm.
obviously you don't want to come across a storm, but the storm's not necessarily going to be coming after you. And I think that's like a cool thing about how the Heed have functioned throughout this book and do function, especially like obviously to open up our story.
Yeah, a force of nature. That's an interesting. I feel like that's a really a good way of describing them. That because yeah, they don't have that sort of vengeful nature that something maybe like a little bit more intelligent or a little bit more intentional might have. And I don't know. Like I think in some ways that makes them like they're scary, but it's also like once you get away from them, you're away from them. They're not the
Yeah.
main point of that. You see, it's funny. You see, I just redrew the thumb because I realized I drew it on the wrong side of the hand, and that's why just there a minute ago. Yeah, it's funny watching these things back. You see the areas I kind of struggle through, which I historically has been something I've been terrified to show, as far as process goes. But because it's like it's this feeling of like if people see me struggling through pages, it's like they're gonna see me as a fraud, but it's like it's so crazy because everyone struggles through pages, you know?
Yeah, I think our whole point here is to be really open to our process and just talk about it and honestly just like have fun with the making of this and showing this. It's the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
part.
for sure.
But yeah, no, I think even like writing these Ahid, I've always felt the pull like, oh no, like I need to bring them back into the story again. Where the he would kind of like open the book with them, but then maybe we don't see them for like 20, 30, 40 pages, 50 pages. But I think that's like what becomes really cool about the Heat is they're not the main force of evil in this book, and they're not meant to represent that, and they're not what the bugs are running from. They're just kind of a manifestation of what it means to like be so far apart from community, and when you live in that shelter so alone, you kind of become like not something that's like even like really operating amongst society, kind of just become a force, like we said, force of nature. And I think leaning into that and letting that he just be kind of that operating force of nature, like they're a cloud storm, and that cloud storm might come upon our ants another day. They happen to come upon our ants this day, but they're not going to be what our ants are always talking about or thinking about. I think that's like one of the things that makes them so cool and so unique to our story as a whole.
Yeah, and I think also like I mean the timing of when you wrote them kind of coming into the story, I love because it's also sort of it's like the heat coming in is such like a intense moment because it feels like they're adding insult to injury. Of just like already the colonies are kind of starting to fall apart, and just before this, we have like basically one colony announcing they're going to separate from all the other colonies in terms of just being a part of this sort of, I guess, like coalition of colonies in some ways. And it's like the second they announce, then it's basically like things are falling apart there, and then the Heat enter.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really sort of like smart writing, just in terms of finding, just feeling like these characters like you're forcing them into this moment of desperation, and sort of when you see a character in a moment of desperation, you really start seeing their true nature come out. And I think that that's a really cool way to sort of like yeah, like I guess force somebody to kind of force a character to sort of like face who they are and who they want to be.
Yeah. I think it's also just kind of cool as a whole, like how we're using the heat and what you were saying before, the pages before, you kind of see all these different colonies kind of finding within each other. And they're so focused on all these kind of like minor issues of whether they're going to like follow this order of ant colony or they're not going to follow this order. These people should be in this job, not this job. And they're kind of like fighting amongst each other. And they're so deep intertwined into that argument that they're unable to like really like know, oh, actually there's this force of nature that's moving closer to us and it's about to destroy everything, but we're going to be so focused on these minor things and we're going to forget this major thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, yeah, it also in like it sort of is like forcing them, yeah, forcing them to kind of come together. Yeah, which I think is kind of an important moment for the story, I guess, long term. And yeah, I guess one of the things, Jacob, I'm curious about. And again, it's one of those questions I realize I don't think I've ever asked this. And have wondered off and on as I've been drawing these pages. But how did you come up with the name Ahid?
I think I have to like cross reference this for sure, but I think they're just a force of darkness. They're just like death,
Okay.
basically incarnate. I will double. I'm pretty sure that that is the name. It's funny because you kind of give them a name for a while, and like you have reason behind the name, and so many months go on, you kind of forget why you might
Yeah,
have
yeah,
called them
yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that's just like it's got a really good ring to it, and so I never really questioned it. I was like, yeah, they are the Heat. Like that's a good name. But like, but then I was like, what did that come from? Because I guess we just never really like had that conversation. It just was like, you're like, yeah, this is what they're called. And I was like, yeah, that is what they're called. And then we moved on, you know?
Yeah, no, I think it is one of those things that it was a little bit. There was a little grounding to why, but mostly it just sounded cool for this force.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think, I love this was one of my favorite pages I've inked. Even now, up to doing 30 pages of this thing, it's like this still. I think I look back on this page. This was a really fun one. But I think as much as I love this one in inks, and I don't know if we can sort of fade in the color at some point, but or show. Well, I don't know when we'll show off the color, but this is the only page so far I've colored, and we are planning on having this whole book colored for those who are wondering. Um, and yeah, the colors. I think I love the way it sort of like brings this sort of ominous tone to it. And
Yeah,
sort of makes their sort of darkness feel even darker in some ways.
yeah,
Yeah. So I'm really
like
excited to show those off.
100%. The colors really bring this page, make it feel that much more epic. But yeah, no, it's an epic page, and we're super excited to share more of our pages and just talk more about this world as we make it. Subscribe if you want to see more.
Yep.